All right, Alexander, let's talk about what's going on in the UK. We've had some interesting debates between Sunak and Truss. I've read some of the polling, and it looks like within the party that Truss is ahead. Am I reading that right? She is leading in the
You
conservative
absolutely
party
are.
polling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Truss? Does it look like it's going to be Truss? And what did you make of the debates?
Well, it is increasing. It is increasingly looking as if it will be Truss, even though I personally think she did very badly in the debates. But that's my own personal perspective because I found myself in disagreement with her over virtually everything. I would also say that though I don't like the man at all, I mean I'm no fan of Sunak. I consider him a dyed-in-the-wool globalist and somebody who I deeply mistrust. He does come across to me as a much, much more competent and clever man than Truss. And I would also say that I think he's technically much better equipped to be Prime Minister. However, the problem is that most people don't like Sunak either. He comes across as arrogant and supercilious. There's even been some comments about him coming across as condescending in these debates, which I think is to some extent true. And besides, I think that Truss is this empty page upon which lots of people in the party and in the country are now, putting their own what they want to see. And the one thing I would say about Truss, the one signature issue that is going to make her Prime Minister, if she does become Prime Minister, is Ukraine. She's the person who's taken the hardest possible line in the government over Ukraine, which is saying something. And that has solidified the political class behind her. I don't mean, the whole country, but certainly the political class. They remain deeply committed to this war in Ukraine. And I don't think they fully trust Sunak to see it through. So I think it will be Truss. But I have to say, the more I learn about her, and, bear in mind, Liz Truss, until about a year ago, was, a virtual unknown in British politics. I sort of heard of her, but not as anybody I thought remotely important. But the more I've learnt about her, the more extraordinary her background is. I mean, I'm talking now about her political background. But I mean, she was at one point a liberal, a liberal Democrat, not a conservative apparently, or at least a liberal Democrat supporter. She was a Republican. She was somebody who supported Remain. And now she stands for, fervid Brexitism, the flag, the monarchy, Ukraine, all of these things. In other words, she's, become the sort of arch Tory, waving the Union Jack. And it's astonishing to me how few people seem to want to challenge her on this, given that her career suggests on the contrary somebody who's not been very consistent, let's put it like this, in terms of her political lines. I should say that I've also heard people some very, very strong criticisms of her descriptions of her past. She's claimed, for example, that she said some extremely unpleasant things about her school, the school where she was educated, that it was, a rough state school. People who've been there say that she's completely misdescribing it, that it wasn't like that at all. And they pointed out that the education she got in that school got her into, I think it was Oxford, so it can't have been that bad. And, so she's said lots of things which in a normal political climate ought to be working against her. But none of that matters because people don't like Sunak and they are fixated on continuing with the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, it sounds to me from your description that Truss is a stooge and an opportunist. That's the impression that I get. But
Yeah.
do you think Sunak's play at lashing out at China will give him the edge over Truss? That seems to be his strategy, at least with regards to foreign policy. Okay, Truss is going hard on Ukraine. I'll go hard on China. Do you think that's going to make a difference or no?
Yeah. No, in a short word, because I think in that kind of competition, Sunak is always going to lose to Truss. I mean, whatever he says about China, Truss can very easily cap it, and that's, I think, what's going to happen. Whether he likes it or not, the fact is that Sunak, who a year or 2 years ago looked like the next prime minister, he's lost his chance. I think he's lost his ability now to continue this, to succeed Johnson. I think he's antagonised too many people. I think the mood in the party, not so much the parliamentary party, but in the country amongst Conservative members, has hardened too much against him for him able to turn things round by talking up the China threat.
Can Truss, you might laugh at this question, but I have to ask it. Can Truss save the UK, or are things too far gone on a domestic level and on a foreign policy level? Does she have it in her to save the trajectory of things in the UK? And if she doesn't have it in her, what does that mean? Elections, Labour, Stammer?
Yeah, well, first of all, can I just say straight away, the UK is capable of being saved. I mean, if you have strong, purposeful, imaginative, creative leadership, which inspires confidence, we're still a big country, relatively speaking. We're still a rich country, relatively speaking. We could pull things through. We'd have to make some very difficult decisions, some very difficult choices. But, you know, if we started behaving rationally and logically and started to make use of our continuing advantages and strengths, we could do it. Truss, obviously, is not the person to do that. I mean, nothing that she says goes beyond cliche. And that's what makes it look, what makes her so dangerous. You said that she was a puppet and an opportunist. I mean, she talks like you would expect a puppet and an opportunist to do. What she does is she's very good at mouthing cliches and telling the Conservative membership what they want to hear, which is not necessarily what they need to hear. And on the basis of that, she's going to win the premiership.
Yeah, doesn't... I agree with you. The UK, if they had the right leadership, could pull through. But that's the core of the problem, right there. And you go from Boris,
because let's talk
to Truss or Sunak, to Truss or Sunak. That is the core of the problem. Is the leadership. So, but before you answer on that, I also just want to ask you: don't the Conservative Party members realize this as well? I mean, they can't be blind, Alexander. I mean, we see it. Everyone that's watching this video, I'm sure, sees it, that Truss is not going to do the job at all, not even close to rising up to what is needed at this moment in time.
No. You're talking about a very, very small electorate. The Conservative Party membership is a small electorate. And, I mean, to say it very simply, they like what Truss is saying because it corresponds with their feelings, and they don't like Sunak as a person. Now, if they liked Sunak, they might listen to what he says, even when Sunak says some things that they might not wish to hear, but which they need to hear. But if Sunak says it because they don't like him already, they won't pay much attention to him. And given that that is so, they will prefer Truss, who at least casts this comfort blanket over them. Now, the alternative, let's just talk about the Labour Party. I mean, the problem with the Labour Party is that it is completely barren of ideas. Its policies are simply another repackaged version of the politics that have led Britain into this impasse in which it is in at the present time. So if we had Starmer as Prime Minister, it wouldn't be any different from how it was when, say, David Cameron was Prime Minister. I mean, there really isn't enough difference to really make it a meaningful choice anymore. He might be Starmer was a slightly different personality than Johnson, but to my mind, if you're talking about Cameron and Starmer, they're almost interchangeable.
Yeah, but listening to you, the only conclusion one can come with is, without the right leader, and there's no one in sight at the moment who qualifies as that. I mean, you're going over the cliff. I mean, I can't see anybody in the political class right now that can step up. No one.
No, I agree with that. I've said this before. I have never known things in Britain to be so bad. Now, I've known periods of deep economic crisis before. I mean, there was a period of economic crisis in the late 70s, or at least economic stalemate and stagnation in the late 70s. It looked as if things were going badly wrong. And of course, we had a very, very deep recession in the 80s. But there was purposeful leadership at that time, and there was options. There were people who were coming up with new ideas, who were coming up with alternatives. Margaret Thatcher in the 70s, other people after her. I mean, even Tony Benn on the left, many people didn't like him, and of course he never became Prime Minister. But he did represent an alternative, and it was an alternative which, precisely because you disagreed with it, you could form your own alternative views and develop ideas, if you like, in competition with the kind of things that Ben was coming up with. What we have at the moment is a situation where every part of the political class thinks and talks in cliches. There is no real debate at all. And that means that we have no real way forward. And I'm afraid it's exactly as you said, because bad as the problems are, they're not unsolvable. But to solve problems, you need leadership. And for the first time in British history, it's not there on offer.
Anybody? Do you see anybody? I mean,
no, I don't see anybody. I mean, think of the darkest times that people remember in Britain, 1940, when Neville Chamberlain's government had lost the confidence of the country and of Parliament. There was Churchill, and opposite Churchill, when he became Prime Minister, there was Attlee, who led the Labour Party. All very, solid, powerful, well, some people would say brilliant people. There's no one like that around today.
Okay.
If we had the kind of leaders in 1940 that we have today, the history of the world and of Britain would have been very different.
Wow. All right. We'll leave with those thoughts. Duran.locals.com, ODYSEE, Rumble, BitChute, and check out our Telegram channel and go to the Duran shop. 10% off when you use the code. Good day. Take care.